everyone.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy Monday.
It's another Monday Rundown. Say That channel. We're happy to have you with us. So if you are here with us for the first time, welcome. Welcome to our Say That community, where we are all about unapologetically talking about the things that we feel like more people should be talking about, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
In all areas and in all facets. We started off in the area of the business world, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and you can catch all of that on our Wednesday shows. Our Monday Rundowns are really to engage in conversations around topics that may not have to do with business, but probably, to be quite honest, have an impact on your business in a way, or indirectly in a way. But I think today's going to be a really good example of just like the things that we're talking about, things that are in current events, things that you may even have heard of at like a little blip. But we're going to deep dive it just a little bit more to engage in conversation around that and see what we can learn from each other and grow.
Absolutely. And guys, today is an exciting question because we actually got it from one of our fans, community members, one of you out there that watch the show regularly. So thank you. And thank you for submitting the video that we're going to also jump into. So let's dive into today's question and get after it. So guys, today's question or topic is,
are we overparented as Americans?
And obviously we have a broad scope of people that we reach. And our goal is to actually be a very global brand as a whole, would say that. So we are going to just stick to Americans today. But if you can relate to some of the things we talk about, definitely make sure that you guys jump in the chat and share your opinions. All right, Janelle, what do you think?
So I think it's a generational thing. I have been talking about this with my colleagues. Many of you know that I teach on a graduate school level, and graduate schools across the United States, I would even dare say the globe. So to our global audience out there, there has been an identification that the adults that we think that we're teaching in graduate school are actually not at the developmental stage of what adult learning should be at this point, and that they are more like teenagers, in such that there is this request for independence, but I don't want to do it alone. I want to do this on my own. Like, I can do it. But wait, can you help me? You're like, what?
Oh, wow.
This is insane. Like, and so it feels very parenting like, where in graduate school, when you're teaching adult learners, there isn't this like, oh, but can like you help me figure it out? It's you have a desire to learn that comes from within, that you don't need external things, right? So for example, the idea of grades, right? Some people need externally, they need that reinforcement of grades to push them to actually study, right? Whereas adult learners don't necessarily need some people still need an external push, sure, but that's motivation, not like the big driver. Yeah, that's not the big motivation. It's because I want to learn the thing. Like, I actually want to learn the thing. I want to do it. I want to know it well. I want to understand it well, because I may have to now educate others on it. So having an exam may not even be the best way to even identify if those learners really understand so assessing an adult learner is typically different as well, because an exam may not really tell you how much they know. It just may tell you, and it may not elicit understanding. All it does is it tells you what they memorized, which doesn't mean that someone understood anything. So I say that to say, what we're noticing is that these students are not really that way. They're more like, they're not as independent. They say they want independence, but then right after it, they're like, but no one came to help me. And you're like, but you said you wanted to do this. Like, I don't understand. What's going on? And there's a frustration in that, because the expectation is that they should be adults, but they're not. Now, the reason behind this, there are many theories. Many of you have heard the helicopter parent thing, right? So the parents are just kind of hovering and they're always around, right? Making sure everything's going well. And if something isn't going well, they kind of like scoop in and like help out the situation. Apparently, our generation, so I will say Gen Zers, I'm like half Gen Z, half millennial. I'm like right on the cusp. So Gen Zers and millennials, to a great degree, are now becoming parents. And what they're doing is they're what's called snowplow parenting, where they're like, oh, there's a challenge here. Let me snowplow it out of your life so you don't even have any challenges. And then they get to grad school, and this is like the first real life challenge of their lives, and they're freaking out because they like never experienced what it's like to do something on their own. So it's one of the theories. It's not the only thing that we believe is impacting this. However, if we're talking about parenting, we used to think helicopter parenting was a lot because they were just like hovering, like in case any challenge comes, then we'll scoop in. But it's a whole other thing to just wipe all challenges from the road, you know, and then the child doesn't experience like what to do on their own, how to live life, because life is full of challenges. Life is not this easy road, you know? And so I think based on those observations, I think our current generation of children are being overparented. I don't necessarily think every generation has, though.
All right. So for me, thank you for what you shared. For me, and just to give some context. So guys, the actual definition of overparenting is to be excessively involved in the day-to-day life of one's child or children, typically in the desire to shield them from difficult situations or help them succeed. And what I love about the definition when you look it up is it says many North American parents tend to overparent their kids. So right in there, Google's like, yeah, let me just let you guys know where this problem stems from. All right. But what's funny about what you just shared is I'm trying, and you're talking a lot from an academic standpoint, and so I could somewhat understand some of that. But what came up to mind for me is how would someone even be able to do? I can understand the idea behind this, but how you accomplish this in terms of overparenting seems fascinating to me, because I would wonder, and I am from a generation where both parents worked. You know, I came home from school. I think at some point I had activities to do after school, but I was very independent. And you mentioned generational, so I'm similar to you. I'm born in '82, so I think we're right at that cusp or something like that in terms of the two watching, you know, seeing being raised, I think differently, as there was a shift culturally. And my parents didn't come to my games. I didn't have the ability to communicate with my parents throughout the day. So there are certain things that I think of now that are just, as we make advances in society, that are just going to allow parents more access to their kids. And I'm wondering if it's like you mentioned snow plowing, if these people if this wouldn't have been the same if our parents had had the ability to do what parents are now having the ability to do. Does that make sense? Like my son is 5. When I was 5, I didn't have a cell phone. That wasn't even a thing. Or maybe it was. I don't know when cell phones came out, so don't quote me on that. But I know I certainly didn't have a cell phone until I was in college, actually.
That's right.
So even for me, my mom couldn't reach me unless I was in the house. So it's so funny to me now. In my mind, it's like, but I wonder if my mom wanted to, if she wouldn't have called 10 times a day until I got home from school or whatever. You know what I mean? If she had the ability to, but she didn't. So how could she have done that? And then the other part I just want to throw in there is when you mentioned being able to plow things in someone's life till it gets easy, the first thing that came to mind for me was finances. And I'm like, and then in my mind, an average household, we talked about this, you know, just from an income, the way the financial situations many Americans find themselves in. I'm wondering how they could even afford to overparent or snowplow for their kids when it seems many
credit card debt.
Oh, okay. So then
I'll take credit card debt for $5,000, Alex.
Okay. I think that's something that we've talked about during the whole like the Black Friday time and Christmas time and holiday time. So I definitely, it's funny. I actually do believe we're overparented as Americans. And a lot of that for me comes from a place of, it does seem like people seem, I don't want to call people sensitive because that seems insensitive to say. But it seems things that I know we went through as a kid, bullying, things like that, seems to obviously still exist. And personally, I wouldn't have even wanted to grow up with, I'm thankful I didn't grow up during an era where social media was a thing, because I got bullied in school and I could only imagine what that would even look like to be bullied socially online, things like that. So it's weird. I do believe that we're overparented, but I also think children and people as a whole today have a lot more access to things that could emotionally bring them down or make things a lot easier. We were just, before we even got on here, talking about ChatGPT. It's like there's so many funny nuances to this. Like that's going to make things a lot easier. So I wonder how it's going to have negative ramifications later on.
Well, and just to agree with you, or like further agree with you, I said the snowplow thing is one aspect. There are lots of
a
other
few of them. Yeah. But in my mind, I was just like, how could they even do it?
But you brought up the second biggest confounding factor, the age of social media. There is a distinct difference between when children at the age of 12 had access to Facebook. There's legit, like there's a year. There's a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, and they actually give the exact year when kids who are 12 years old had access to Facebook, and you can like legit see a shift. So social media is a part of
this. Okay, because that's what comes up for me. That's one of the things. I was like, I couldn't even imagine being and seeing some of the people, well, I won't get into the topic of it, but just a lot of harm can also come from just the access that we have now. As much as it is good to be able to get access to your children more often, they have access to outside influences that aren't you through some of these same mediums. So but let's jump into today's video and hear what they have to say on the topic.
American parenting really changed in the 1990s. When I'm talking about the book, I go around the country, I ask audiences, at what age were you let out? At what age could you go outside and play with your friends with no adult supervising? And I say, only people over 40. What's your answer? Call it out. And it's 5, 7, 8, 6, 5, 7. It's always 5 to 8. That's what we always did. Between 5 and 8, kids could go outside without an adult. They'd get in arguments, they would play games, they would make rules. They were independent. They got years and years of practicing independence. Then I say, just people under 25. What year were you let out? 12, 14, 13, 16. Nobody says 10 or younger. In the 1990s, as the crime rate was plummeting, as American life was getting safer and safer, Americans freaked out and thought that if they take their eyes off their children, the children will be abducted. Now, this goes back, the fear was stoked by cable TV in the 1980s. There were a few high-profile abductions. But it's not until the 1990s that we really start locking kids up and saying, you cannot be outside until you're 14 or 15. We took this essential period of childhood from about 8 to 12, when kids throughout history have practiced independence, have gotten into adventures, have made rafts and floated down the Mississippi River. We took that period and said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over. Now, a couple years before you go to college, now you can go outside. Oh, okay, go off to college. And a lot of them are not ready. They're just not used to being independent. When they get to college, they need more help. They're asking adults for more help. Protect me from this. Punish him for saying that. Protect me from that book. There's a very sharp change with kids who were born in 1995 and afterwards, surprisingly sharp. Jean Twenge, in her book iGen, analyzes surveys of behavior of time use. And beginning with kids born in 1995, they spend a lot less time going out with friends. They don't get a driver's license as often. They don't drink as much. They don't go out on dates. They don't work for money as much. What are they doing? They're spending a lot more time sitting on their beds with their devices, interacting that way. These are the first kids who got social media when they were 13, roughly. They were subjected to much more anti-bullying content in their schools, much more adult supervision. They were raised in the years after 9/11. They were given much less recess and free play with No Child Left Behind. There was much more testing pushed down into earlier grades. We don't know if this is for sure the reason, but they seem to have more difficulty working out problems on their own. The most common thing I hear is that members of Gen Z, if they overhear a joke, if they overhear someone say something, they'll get offended, and then they'll go straight to HR. They go straight to somebody to file a complaint, where previous generations would have either just shaken it off and just said, jerk or asshole or whatever. I think there are a couple things we can say. One is you have to take charge of device use and social media. We don't know for sure, but it looks like a 2-hour limit per day is probably a good idea. Keeping kids off of social media as long as possible is a good idea. It's very hard to do this as one parent when your kids' friends are not limited. So you've got to talk to your kids' friends and all have a common front, all have a common policy, then go to the schools. Schools can solve these problems collectively in ways that individual parents cannot. Outside of school, go to letgrow.org, an organization, a wonderful new organization started by Lenore Skenazy, who wrote the book Free Range Kids. She became famous as America's worst mom because in 2009, she let her 9-year-old son ride the New York City subway. Not only did he survive, he was thrilled. He felt he'd learned something. He felt he could go out into the world. Give childhood back to kids so that they do what they most need to do, which is develop the skills of being an independent adult. Remember that the job of a parent is to work him or herself out of a job.
I love that. America's worst mom, guys.
So this was not on purpose, but that is the author of the Coddling of the American Mind. And I legit was talking about exactly the study he was talking about. I thought it was 12. He said it's 13.
13, yeah.
1995. Like I'm sorry, guys. It's gonna seem like I set this up. I didn't set this up.
No. And we both brought up points that I think he hit fairly early on. And again, guys, make sure you're throwing it in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts on what he just had to say. If you've read that book, did you read it, Janelle, or did you?
Yeah,
just know
I read the
study?
book.
Oh, okay,
I have a ton of things to say because of that. But
go for it.
Different mindset. I mean, what he talks. So he talks specifically about this mother, the worst mom in America, and that's the other thing that happens, right? So even if you try to not be a snowplow parent, then you get this other thing that happens where you're getting a ton of judgment where people are like, what do you mean you're
Can I tell a quick story right there?
Sure.
So Norman and I are coming from the park. The park is literally across the street, for obviously those who don't know, from my parents' home, right? I'm coming with some stuff out of the park. Norman decides he wants to run to the end of the block. A gentleman is coming across the street, sees him, and assumes that, he's a young child and he's by himself. So I've taught Norman, it's okay now. You just need to get across the street once the light changes, so on and so on. The guy sees me and goes, you really shouldn't let him do that. And I looked at the guy and I go, why? And he goes, well, he needs somebody with him. And I said to him, but someone's not always going to be with them. He's literally just going across the street. And now, mind you, the person thought he was doing, to your point, Janelle, something good by protecting this child who he thinks. But in my mind, it's we have to recognize, guys, your kids are going to be outside of your purview more than they will be in the grand scope of their life. So what are we really doing? When I've actually said to Norman, one of the things I tell him in terms of a parenting tip is, if you don't feel comfortable doing it with me around, you probably should not do it. If that's something you think that if I was sitting next to you, you would be uncomfortable. You don't even need to understand why. But if you, for some reason, know if Dad was here, I probably wouldn't want to be doing this, then you probably should just don't get into it. Don't do it. And it seems, again, do I know if it works all the time? No, but it's the logic that I use to explain, because I know we won't always be there.
Right.
You can't always be there. And the point he brought up about their friends.
That is the whole point.
It's the biggest thing. Yeah, that stood out to me, because Norman comes and tells me a ton of stuff about this kid is this way, Dad, and does these things. And I'll often bring up to him, well, then why is he your friend if he's often getting in trouble? What are you doing? Why this kid is your friend? And he's just like, I don't do anything. And I'm like, yeah, but I know he doesn't. It's not that big of a deal to me at this stage.
Right.
But I could see how that could obviously go turn. But continue. What were we saying about the book?
I was going to say, the other thing is the whole point is that you're trying to set your kids up to be independent, because you're not going to be around all the time. So why wait until they're 15 or 16? Or maybe that's an extreme. Why wait until they're 13 to get on the subway by themselves? And I'm going to just stick to the New York thing, because I think that freaks even middle Americans out. They're like, I would never let my 13-year-olds on.
Yeah.
Let's stick to the scariest scenario that you guys can think of, right? One of the number one things he points out is that America is the safest. We're not talking about the school shootings, which is actually even more ironic. And anyway, aside from
As a whole, yeah,
as a
whole,
right?
as a
As
whole.
a whole, you are 10 times safer now as a child than you were 30, 40, 50 years ago as a
When
child.
we grew up, for
Yeah.
sure.
There's all sorts of things that could happen, and not just child abductions. Like the child abduction rate is so low right now, it's ridiculous, right? Like, so like if that's what the parents were so scared of, the reality doesn't meet the fear that's happening, which is like people are so scared that something's going to happen to their kids. So where that comes from the social media, comes from media in general. Whether you're watching things on TV or listening to the news, so like all of those things are having an impact on like the parental mind, which is creating now this like culture of like everyone's got to overparent, and then if you become the worst mom in America, where you let your kid on the subway at 8 years old. I think it's brilliant. I mean, I don't have any children, so I am full disclosure. I don't have any kids, but like I know of parents in New York who are riding that line right now. Their kid is like 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're like, all right, I know it's coming. We're getting to a place where I'm going to have to teach my little kid how to get on the subway and how to do it appropriately. And to be clear, for all the middle Americans out there who are like freaking out about this idea, it's not that she let her little her son, her 8-year-old son, go on the subway and just like explore the 5 boroughs of New York. What she did was she taught her son, she said, look, we're going to go over how do you get to school, right? And
Yeah.
like maybe 5 stops on a train. And so what she did was like drilled it, made sure he understood, get on the train. It's going to say uptown, downtown, right? Like taught him all of that. It's what particular train it is. And then he gets off, which staircase to go up and all of that. And what happened? She was there.
Watching him do it.
She left him. She watched him go do it. And then I forget how exactly it worked. I don't know if she took a cab or like, took a bike. I'm not sure. But she was there when he got off the train. So it's not like she's just like, let him go for hours. She was at the stop where he got off of to like congratulate him on his ability to do this all by himself.
Nice.
In order to then continue to like support
reinforce that.
Yeah, like he's able to do this. See, you can do this, you know, because I won't always be there. Like
no, that makes sense. So to that point you brought up, Janelle, about the abductions, and guys, just for context, the Amber Alert, something that Janelle, you're familiar with that as well, right? The Amber Alert system actually began in 1996 when a young girl was abducted was while riding her bicycle. So there are a couple things that have started since I would say Janelle and I have been born that I know. I remember the other thing was Mothers Against Drunk Driving. When that came out, I had seen it was either a book or something that talked about how, and he mentioned in this, how kids used to be able to play outside at 5, 6, 7, and 8. They were outside with their friends. That was the whole come in for dinner, like that generation. That completely got removed because of things with, and again, obviously this is a very tragic thing that took place, but kids did, and I don't know the percentages, but that became something that the news were pushing heavy. So it definitely seemed like if you left your kids outside, who's to know if they would just get snatched up from a pool, off their bike. There are movies that there's a huge influx of movies that actually came out about child abduction. So things like that, those are the things that are gonna,
I have a special set of skills.
No, there you go. That plague your mind, that make you think, and that was a grown man with a grown child being abducted.
Right.
So you're thinking, man, I'm 56 and I still gotta get you.
Right.
I still gotta come for you. I'm over parenting. You just call him back like, you just have her. You can keep her. That's okay. You can just keep her. No, but this is actually a really interesting topic. This really was. Wow, this is a really good one. Guys, let us know your thoughts on this. And if you have any other things that you guys want to hear us comment on or talk about, audios, questions, please submit that. You have our email, and I think everything's in the description below, so you guys can just connect with us there.
Awesome. Well, as we end, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
We'll see you guys on Wednesday. Be good.